The Administering Institute of Infectious Disease. Alexandria Hypatia, chief alchemist. Once it was a solarium for recuperating aristocrats. Now it's a place of alchemical study. The Crown Killer's taking lives in my name and has to be stopped. It's my hope that Hypatia can explain. They say she's brilliant and altruistic. Well respected across Serkonos.
Personnel, on orders from the Duke, anyone discussing Addermire with non-authorized persons will be court-martialed and imprisoned.
Hello there, and welcome back to Dishonored 2. I didn't really have a chance to speak up until this point. So, finally, here we arrive at the Administering Institute, in search of the Crown Killer, the one who's been doing all of the killings that have been thought to have been done by us. And to do so, to figure out who the Crown Killer is, we should enlist the help of Alexandria Hypatia, the lead physician and an altogether altruistic person, from what we've been told about her. First of all though, we're picking up that little hidden bone charm there. Probably one of the easier ones to miss. If you don't look all around for a path to it, you'll probably think you'll get to it from somewhere inside, and thus miss it entirely. And we were quite fortunate in that this bone charm is actually one that's worthwhile for us to use. Makes it so that every time we restore our mana, it has a chance to be restored to full. Useful since we are making quite liberal use of our powers. So, as always, we are always going to approach areas in crouch mode. You never know when there's a guard about. But we will make liberal use of our fast movement. With the double jump in particular, we basically have the ability to perform a drop takedown on command, anywhere, anytime. A very useful addition to our arsenal.
Before I got transferred to Addermire, I saw one of the Crown Killer crime scenes. Whoever tore that old couple apart, they were enjoying it.
So what do you think then?
I don't know. Coming back at dawn, smudges of blood on the windows. I don't know what to think. Maybe the Duke found some new bear or ape from Pandysia. Keeps me up at night just thinking about it.
One of the great things about this mission here is that it's the first that is truly open. The first two, though they gave you a variety of pathways to progress through the level, were ultimately fairly linear. This one is the first that is just basically a giant circle in its overall design, and it gives you all sorts of vantage points. You can take the main entrance, a variety of side entrances. You can scale up the side of the building and enter via the roof. There are just so many options for you to take. We'll be checking out not quite all of them, but a good majority. And we'll start with the main entrance. Kinda. First of all though, let's make sure to take out this guard.
There's something unsavory going on.
It's by no means necessary, but in the more openly designed missions like this, it's always a good idea to take out guards permanently whenever you're given the option, whether you prefer to do so lethally or non-lethally. Never know when you're gonna have to circle back and then you'll have to deal with them in the future.
Patient's office is off limits to you.
I'm begging you. It would only take a few hours for Dr. Hypatia to see them. My 7-year-old broke her leg carrying water down to the miners. And my 3-year-old has been coughing dust for weeks. His skin is so pale, He's gray. I could bring them here.
I am very sorry, but there's nothing I can do. Dr. Hypatia doesn't accept patients anymore, and the Institute is under the Grand Guard Authority. Apparently, you can't be trusted to do your job without creating problems.
Please, I can't lose another child. Where is Dr. Hypatia?
Lock her up until further notice.
What? No! My children need me! Let me go!
Dude, that's not locking her up. Well, his superior doesn't seem to be too concerned, so I guess we have no reason to be. So, this is what I mean by taking the main entrance, kind of. Using far reach, you can make your way all the way up to this much higher upper level, which gives you a much better vantage point for approaching. Notably though, you can't really fidget your way up there without far reach or the upgraded blink. So if, say, you're doing a no powers run, this isn't really an option for you. Just worth pointing out, the no powers option in this game really does change how you have to approach things. And it is a fun way to play if you don't mind giving up all the fun abilities you can play around with. Taking down these guards has to be done in a fairly careful order. If you do so in the wrong order, one of them will doubtless end up spotting you, and calling all of the guards in the area on your ass. And let me just say right away, there are a lot of guards in the surrounding area. Even more so than there are in existence at the moment. One thing that happens when the alarm is sounded that I haven't mentioned is that additional guards will spawn into the mission. So, something to be best avoided if at all possible. We'll see just how well we can do that. Something worth bringing up about this mission is that there are a lot of sleep dots littering the place.
The Duke of Serkonos.
This not only serves to give the difficulty curve a bit of a softening of sorts at this point, give you a bit of an easier time than you would have given all the guards about, but it also ends up serving a thematic purpose. Naturally, an institute for treating people for all sorts of diseases, both physical and of the mind, would naturally have need of dots to knock people out. In general, this game is pretty good about having items littering the areas that are appropriate for those areas. And there's another one in particular we'll be seeing later. So we could have taken out that wall of light, but that is something the guards notice and will get suspicious about, and we really don't need that direct entrance. So it's best to just leave it alone. This side area here is cordoned off from pretty much the rest of the building. The only way to access it is to end up far-reaching or double jumping, or just parkouring your way up to this upper area. The primary means of entering it are blocked off specifically, like the doorways and such. And there's a reason for that, cause yeah, that's the Crown Killer's handiwork.
A victim of the Crown Killer, no doubt.
Gee, you think? Yeah, they're clearly aware that the Crown Killer is here, but they have orders to cover up their evidence. That letter right there is from that guardsman's partner, who apparently was informed by him that there's something suspicious going on here. And then he turns up dead. Let's just say that working here isn't exactly the greatest opportunity for one's career. So, regardless of how you end up going about it, this was the main entrance to the Adamaya Institute. Let's check out one of the side entrances then. These are definitely better for you to enter the place if you're making less liberal use of your powers, or if you don't have the option to if you're doing the no powers mode. It's a lot softer of an introduction, and you don't really need to use far reach or blink to move about. Oh, and before I forget, that one blueprint we picked up back there from the safe, Combat Sleep Dot, it is super useful. Probably the single best blueprint if you're playing non-lethally.
What should we do with the leftovers? I used to feed them to the dogs, but I'm not allowed to go to the kennels anymore.
Let's feed the rats.
Don't be like that.
I'm not entirely sure why their conversation got interrupted like that. They didn't seem to notice me. They would have remarked about me were that the case. And yet they just stopped talking in the midst of their conversation.
Just once, I'd like to see her buy the drinks. Just one time. Is that too much to ask?
If they had gone on, they would have talked about how this used to be a pretty damn good place to work at, on account of just how wonderful of a person Alexandria Hypatia is. But it's been in kind of a shitty state as of late.
Tasted awful. That wasn't no blue-jawed hagfish. River crust's more likely.
Oh, river crusts. Thankfully, they are not in this game at all, but they were one of the most annoying enemies in the first Dishonored. They were a weird sort of half-animal, half-plant, river fungus sort of creature. I never was entirely sure exactly what they were about, but goddamn if they weren't annoying. They locked sights onto you, and you were going down in a heartbeat, even on the lesser difficulties. Thankfully, they are not found in this game at all. So, to matters that are actually in this game. This dining room here is probably one of the more difficult rooms to stealth through in the game. There's 2 guards patrolling about the hallways. We just took out one of them. The other one's a bit more difficult, because he ends up being watched by the guards that are having dinner. And there are quite a few guards who are having dinner here. Needless to say, taking down all these targets without getting spotted is a rather tall order, so we're just going to ignore that and stealth past them. Fire reach comes in so handy in so many situations. Unfortunately, that requires that we leave behind that rune down there, but don't worry. We'll pick up that soon enough. For now, we'll just deal with this guard up here and explore around a little bit. There are a decent amount of valuables around. This room having 2 extra atomizer solutions. Useful if you're making even more liberal use of your powers than I am. Or if, say, you have checked the custom difficulty option to remove mana regeneration. In that case, you really do need every last one of these solutions. So that's where the rune is, but surrounded on all sides by guards. Isn't exactly easy to approach, so let's not approach it and have it come to us. We are able to do that by picking up a certain upgrade for our fire reach, which now allows us to pull small objects to us. Basically everything in the game that is not nailed down or is not a living god. You know, I really sympathized with that guardsman there. The one who just said, "Damn it, I need a pee." Keep that little factoid in mind, will ya? It'll actually be relevant later. Here we can see that the guards actually have somewhat dynamic movement. Not quite dynamic per se, that's not quite the correct word, as this is a fixed movement pattern that this guard has in particular. More just to say how the guards don't just stroll back from point A to B, but they'll actually wander around the place. And this guard in particular is especially interesting. Now, we just had to take him out right there because he was about to turn around and spot us. But once he's in this room, he'll actually do one of several tasks. He can either check himself out in the mirror over here, despite the fact that, you know, it's not actually a functioning mirror. He can sit down at the typewriter over there in the corner and start typing on it. And he can open up and start reading this book. It's actually an educational book, which suggests that this guard is actually trying to better himself. Good thing we're not being lethal, he might be one of a number of great minds in the future. But yeah, it's a pretty good example of just how varied the guard's movements in this game can be. And how, especially in places where you're not necessarily expected, we just arrived here after all, they haven't received warning of us, how they're not just going around patrolling for you. In fact, they don't even expect anyone to be in this place, to be infiltrating it. So they're just doing their usual rounds and wandering around the place, and just trying to entertain themselves. And it's an attention to world building that you don't usually see in stealth games, even modern ones. So we could have gone through that doorway there and explored a little bit further down, but with all those dogs about, they're really good at sniffing you out. And that guardsman, it's rather difficult to do so without being spotted. And there's not actually anything valuable there anyway, so let's continue on up. Unfortunately, heading upstairs isn't much easier.
Yes, 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 yes.
See? The game agrees.
Come on.
But yeah, as I was going to say, this place is packed to the brim with guards. It's like it's a sardine can, but with patrolling guardsmen instead of sardines. So, much less tastier, unfortunately. Even the ones sleeping about are best to be removed in a more permanent fashion. That way you can walk and even run about the place without having to worry about waking them up. That's another reason why it's a good idea to take down every last guard. These two in particular are especially annoying if you're trying to make your way up. Obviously they end up blocking this main route, and even if you try far-reaching up via those chandeliers, they still end up spotting you very often. So there's really nothing for it but to knock them out. Unfortunately, given their positioning, it can be very difficult to do so, as I kind of accidentally show off right here. They're very good at spotting you, but thankfully they only caught just the barest glimpse of us. So we can still salvage the situation.
I wonder who that was.
This is where dark vision really comes in handy, when guards are spotting you and you need to know exactly where they are at all times. Without it, it's much more difficult to do that. So just waiting while they wander around until we have a good vantage point for approach. And I think this is it here. Conveniently, they're still close enough together to be linked with Domino, meaning all it takes is one good hug session and our problem is solved. This is why, for me at least, Domino is my MVP, most valuable power. It may not be flashy, but it certainly gets the job done. And let's just be sure to remove these unconscious bodies to less conspicuous spaces. We should have gotten rid of most, if not all, of the guardsmen that will patrol about this area, but it doesn't hurt to be sure. If another guard ends up encountering an unconscious guard, they will be more alert, and that can end up being a real bit of trouble. So it's good to shore up our chances. Unfortunately, we can't continue on the second floor there, it's locked. So we'll just have to find a key first. So, I mentioned before that there are a number of ways to enter the Adamaya Institute and that we wouldn't be taking all of them. This is one of those.
Why, we've got 2 squads assigned to Adamaya to watch one woman.
Oh, are they really?
Yes, sir. Martell asked why we're not out bashing the house.
Give for an entire...
Yeah, I don't know why the conversation glitched out like that. I guess it's just a bit fiddly. But that whole east terrace there, when we initially far-reached up to that higher vantage point at the entrance, oh, thanks Emily, sorry for talking over you there, there was a bit of a balcony with 2 doorways on it. They both end up leading out to those terraces east and west, and that's another way you can approach. Usually I just completely ignore those though. They do give you other ways of entering the building, and you do avoid most of the guardsmen that way, aside from the ones patrolling out there. But I prefer to enter close to the ground and make my way slowly up, disabling guardsmen as I can. This, more so than perhaps any other level in the game, really does benefit you if you take out the guardsmen one by one as you go along.
Hypatia never leaves Adamaya. Remember that.
Sir, it's just that the other night she went missing, and I still don't see how she got out.
Maybe you're not. Anyone asks, the good doctor never leaves the grounds unless it's on official business for the Duke. Got it.
I think I understand, sir.
Interesting. Apparently, Alexandria Hypatia, despite being locked up here, managed to get out of the god's sight.
A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, G, J, K, L, M, N, Q.
See what I mean when I mentioned previously that this game is so good about its world building? It even has its own custom ABC songs for the gods to sing. But yes, this whole situation with Dr. Hypatia does seem rather odd. I wonder where it all could be leading.
The blackouts are worse, and my dreams have taken a turn towards the disturbing. Even rest eludes me. Duke Bell seemed overprotective at first, but increasingly, I'm a prisoner in my own lab. The soldiers stationed here leave me alone, but even then I feel like I'm being watched. What really saddens me is the loss of my work. I've always thrived on my connection to the people who need me the most. The workers and their families. Each time I hear there's been an outbreak of some fever or some new condition among the miners, it pains me that I am not with them, working to ease their suffering.
The plot thickens. Whatever could be going on around here? Yeah, I'm not gonna spoil it, but the game is being so coy about what's happening here, even though it's so obvious. If only just from genre tropes. Anyway, the important thing about exploring Dr. Hypatia's office there is it picks up the key that gives us access to most areas in the building. Notably though, not this door here. This door that seems to be extra guarded with a trap even. Now that is a mystery that is legitimate. So we now have the run of the place aside from that one solitary door upstairs. And we'll start at the lowest most, the second floor. We'll check out the laboratory proper after a little bit. There's actually some content that you miss out on if you go up there first, in fact. So here you want to be really careful when you approach. If that guard is actually looking in this direction when you open up the door, he will notice you. And that will end up screwing with an event that happens here, so beware.
How is he?
He's losing it. Yelling nonsense for hours.
Could you understand any of it?
Something about being attacked by a monster one night. Some beast that wanted to scoop the brains out of his skull.
I see. Keep this to yourself, will you? No need to spread silly rumors.
Of course, man.
Let's find out if I can make him see reason.
I'll admit I didn't show off that interaction in the best possible way. Funnily enough, after playing through this mission, I watched a playthrough on YouTube by a YouTube user named Zevik.
Why? They have to know something. Why won't you believe me? Dr. Hypatia, she believes me. She knows something's not right and...
Oh, nope, we're putting a stop to that. And the funny thing about that playthrough is you can be right behind them when they're having that conversation and they will not see you at all. The gods' cones of vision can be really restrictive at times.
You're Hamilton? Why did they lock you up? You know something?
I swear, I know what I saw. Hooded. I just caught a glimpse. So much hate in the eyes. As if the world needed more of that. I'm not seeing things. I hope they didn't steal my notes. I need to go back to my room. They took my key.
Ah, well, I think we now know how to access that one locked door up above.
What a fool I was.
But we'll do that later. For now, let's explore the rest of this laboratory here. It's not the main one, the one where Dr. Hypatia presumably is. Instead, it's that of her assistant, who we'll be hearing more about. Also, just a nice little setting detail here. When they're not being used for plot dumps, Audiographs are actually used in-universe to play music. There's a few of those located in the first Dishonored, and I really do like them because they actually give a setting justification as to why these things are littering the place. Still not so much why people are fond of recording their messages on them. Maybe it's just the popular fad at the time, I don't know. Now, even though there's some pretty serious science equipment going on in that room, we're not going to be able to check it out just yet. We need yet another key. But at the very least, we can loot this room next to it. This being one of the rooms of Dr. Hypatia's assistant, Vasco. Several notes from one to the other. And if you read them, they're pretty normal sounding. They really don't tell us anything new. But it seems that Dr. Hypatia has been acting a little bit strangely, according to Vasco there in his diary. I wonder what that could be about. Oh, and this room here gives you another way of approaching the guardsmen of getting past them, but it's kind of filled with blood flies, so it's certainly not my favorite way of doing so. I tend to prefer to just ignore it. Alright, well, that is the second floor finished off, so I suppose it's time to get to the main showing. The third floor, where the sealed-off laboratory is. And, it has a pretty good reason for being sealed, as it turns out.
I've never seen such a massive infestation.
Well, that's not quite right. That one abandoned apartment was pretty damn infested. Still, this place is kind of in a league of its own. Fortunately, we have plenty of tools to deal with it. So, I mentioned before, and it's been brought up in the thread, there is a huge discrepancy in this game with how threatening the bloodflies are to the general populace, and how threatening they are to you, the player, to Emily, to Corvo. And it's just kind of a huge shame. Like, apparently this guy came in here packing incendiary bolts and explosive alcohol, and yet he got taken down instantly. But as we show off right here with those same tools, we have no trouble making our way through. And while part of that certainly is due to the fact that, you know, we're the protagonist, we have special powers, literally in the story given the fact that we're one of the chosen few of the outsider, when we're not actually using those powers and we're just sniping these nests from a distance, I really don't see why this couldn't have been done by one of those other people. It's just a point where the world building in this game is probably at its weakest. And it is kind of a shame. I really wish the bloodflies were more threatening in a gameplay sense. It would make them a lot more fun to deal with. As it is, they're not threatening at all, and they're more of a bother than anything else. Like, we don't even need to use incendiary bolts and explosive bottles. We can just run around swinging our sword, and as long as we have health elixirs to heal up with, we're basically never at risk of dying. And it's a huge shame. So, those are some strange noises. That must be Dr. Hypatia. I guess she's doing some sort of dissection? Let's see what she's up to.
Are you a patient of mine? I'm sorry. I should know that.
I'm here to ask you about something.
Do you cover your face because you were hurt? The afflictions we treat here are more common than anyone likes to admit.
I'm not here for treatment. I'm looking for Anton Sokolov.
Sokolov? Yes, he was here for a short time, but she took him away to see Kirin Jindosh. Do you hear something?
What about the Crown Killer? The patient of yours?
The Crown Killer? That name came from the newspapers. I'm afraid I don't... Oh yes, the murders. I was in Dunwall, studying diseases found among whaling crews. Wait, did someone just call me? I've been forgetting things. The Crown Killer is an interesting case. I feel almost sure I could help with that. It's just, I used to do such good work, and now my memory is failing me. Who is that calling me? Excuse me.
So I mentioned before that my empathy with that urine-fraught god would end up becoming relevant later. And this is that point. I kinda had to take a pee break here, and I took long enough that I had to do a fade cut there. Perhaps that was too much information, but I thought it'd be amusing to regale you with that tale. So,
Something under my fingernails again. What was I working with? Iodine, perhaps?
There's what seems to be a fresh corpse on that table there. I guess she failed to save someone? Odd though that there was a body there at all, given that she isn't taking any new patients.
Something is terribly wrong. But I can't put my finger on it.
Yeah, as I've been saying, there's some mystery going on here, but who knows what it could possibly be about. In this room filled with dissected, dismembered body parts.
What would say about this?
And newspaper articles about the Crown Killer. Really, it's a mystery. Knives, too, stuck in maps. Maps of Kanaka and Dunwall with certain spots circled.
From down in a well. Somewhere.
It's almost as if these spots were important to Dr. Hypatia. And hey, one was right near Dunwall Tower.
Terrible killings. So much blood. So much meat.
Where one of the Crown Killer killings occurred.
Why are you so damn timid? You little mouse.
Also, if you actually read those notes that are in that office there, it just spells out what's going on. As if it weren't obvious enough already.
I didn't used to lose things like this. A disease of the memory, perhaps. A common affliction for the gifted.
One thing I failed to do here that I'll note, you can use the hat on her here, and it gives some rather interesting little lines.
I would take hold of your tongue and pull it from your head if I could.
Lines related to the odd things she's saying at the moment.
You did well finding Anton Sokolov, my friend. The old man is with Kieran Jindosh, who's prying him apart.
I'll save
digging
her.
out all
Drive
his
nails between
adding
his
Sokolov's
toes.
knowledge to his own. Who knows what wonders of natural philosophy Jindosh will reveal in future days. But it's time for you to come out once again. Time to play.
Now there's an idea.
We
An
have
elixir.
need for your special talent. The good doctors do for a trip to Dunwall because Ichabod Boyle is next on the list. Make haste. And make this one messy. Give the newspaper something to write about.
Days and nights. With blood fly maggots worming around underneath.
Dr. Hypatia certainly does have some interesting hobbies, doesn't she? Such as sticking heads on spikes in a laboratory. You know, like you do. Every biologist has one. Hello there, my friend. You don't look like you're doing so well.
Are you all right?
Dr. Hypatia did this. She's the Crown Killer.
Oh, really?
But she's not herself. She developed a serum trying to help the miners. The first version caused horrible changes to her mind. It's too late for me, but maybe you can still save her. She's a good person.
What can I do?
In my safe, in disease treatment, you'll figure out how to make the counter serum help her. The safe code is 4 8-8.
I've always wondered what your flesh tastes like, my dear assistant. They should have let me take the Vice Overseer. But no, the Duke's a coward. I'm hungry. Promise me another muscle gardener from the Grand Palace.
So yeah, Dr. Alexandria Hypatia is the Crown Killer.
She's gone. What happened?
She's a strong, independent sociopath who don't need no morals. Let's take that on the go with us. I get the feeling it wouldn't be a good idea to listen to it here. So, the reason why I'm kind of ragging on the game as far as this plot point goes is the game is capable of being subtle with its writing, and especially with its world building, and yet it just drops the ball so hard here that it just baffles the mind. My mind, at least. Oh, yeah, that's not good. That's Scappa. I don't actually know if she ever actually leaves the laboratory area. I've never had her follow me far enough to find out. Usually I just duck out without her noticing me in the first place. It's not very hard. She ends up losing interest rather quickly. And that is kind of a shame. This mission would be so much cooler if, once she went mad, she started wandering the place in its entirety, taking down any guardsmen that were still wandering the place, and making it all the more difficult to actually deal with her.
I come and I go, putting Hypatia to sleep as I want. But even when she's awake, I'm with her, looking out through her eyes. My cold, dry sister. She saves her love for the sooted workers, suffocating deep down in the mines, for the children in hovels at the edge of the city, cursed with short, nasty lives. And for Vasco, her trusted assistant.
Let's see what's in here.
Wherever did he go, dear sister? I long to take him apart, to roll in the mess, rutting against his slippery skull, driving myself against his red fever. In time, good Vasco. In time.
To bring us back to what I was talking about earlier with regards to the quality of the writing, that audiograph right there, it may not be subtle, in fact it's the farthest thing from subtle, but it's still pretty damn well written if I do say so myself.
I finally understand it. There's a part of Hypatia that she doesn't even know about. It's always there, riding along in her mind, takes over and forces her to use more of the original serum with some regularity. The Duke keeps her here and, if I'm right, sends her out on diabolical assignments. Hypatia is the one the newspapers are calling the Crown Killer. She leaves and comes back, leaving bloody footprints. But there's a cure, a counter serum. I'll try to administer it once I get my notes from the safe in disease treatment. Hello? Oh, Alexandria. I was just... No. It's you!
Yes, Vasco, my love. You're found out, and now we have some experiments to conduct. Come, I'll make you comfortable.
No!
Well voice acted too. Pretty much any time Grim Alex there is speaking, I am just enraptured completely. Whoever voices Resident Jekyll and Hyde here, I really have to give props to. She does an excellent job. But yeah, the writing may be excessive, but it's purposefully excessive, and it works given the situation they've set up. And that's why I say it's good, as opposed to the whole, oh, mystery over who the Crown Killer really is when it's so obvious right from the get-go. So, what happens right here, we've picked up a bottle of ether. And much like in real life, ether here can end up acting as an anesthetic agent. Also much like real life, ether is highly flammable.
That sounded like broken glass.
We get to see both properties here. The latter of which I wasn't exactly expecting. So you can find ether bottles in some of the missions. Not the most common occurrence, but you can find a few in this one at least. It's appropriate given it's a laboratory setting. And it's a useful way of knocking out multiple guards at once. Unfortunately, if there's also a flame source anywhere around, it kind of causes everything around it to catch on fire and combust. So, that's 3 bads on my part right there.
I hope this works.
Anyway, as to exactly what we're doing here, which you probably don't know since I haven't discussed it, and I haven't really been talking about the notes we've been picking up, Vasco has been developing a cure for Dr. Hypatia. Something to reverse the Jekyll situations he's got going on. And fortunately for us, despite it being a rather complex process, involving all sorts of reagents, he was actually mostly finished by the time he was discovered. All we had to do was find a blood fly infested corpse, take a sample, and just finish the process. And now, science. Yep, that's science alright. Beakers, strange clear liquids, Bunsen burners. Science.
For her sake, I hope this works.
And now we have a cure in our giant novelty syringe. Seriously, did the thing really need to be that large? The needle we're injecting her with isn't even all that big. I think you could have made it smaller, more discreet. And that would probably aid in trying to inject her with it. Because I get the feeling she's not exactly going to be cooperating in that regard. So yeah, she doesn't really go anywhere else in the building, which, if this mission has any failing, is probably that. Just would have been so much more fun if she wandered around the entirety of the place, and you had a reason to actually be scared of her. As it is, she's limited to this single room. If you do take your eyes off of her, you can end up losing track pretty easily because of how quickly she moves. But dark vision solves that issue handily enough.
Young and healthy and well fed. Rich then.
No, no, no! Not back to sleep! I won't go. I won't give it back!
Dr. Hypatia?
Yes. I'm sorry. Something's not right with me. Maybe I contracted something working with infectious samples.
No. Someone was poisoning you. But you should be better now. I found some alchemical notes and made a counter serum.
Poisoning me?
Don't worry. I'm gonna take care of it. If you need a place to lay low for a few days, come find us. I'm staying with an ally on a boat called the Dreadful Whale.
So, another odd thing with this whole mission here, the writing. Apparently, Emily is strangely confident in the newly cured and rather confused Dr. Hypatia's ability to escape the Institute, which is still heavily guarded. She says the same thing even if you don't take out all the guardsmen. And to make it all the way back to the Kanaka shore, and board the dreadful whale before we ship off. And slight spoilers, she does. I just feel that, I don't know, the game could have sold that a little bit better. Maybe have us take Dr. Hypatia with us. That would make making this escape sequence more difficult. At least if we didn't knock out all the guards already. I don't know, it's just another place that the game kind of fails. And yeah, that was Hamilton's room. He was convinced that Dr. Vasco was actually the Crown Killer. Now imagine if the game had made us think that as well and had provided convincing evidence. That would have made that mystery actually a mystery. But alas. Also, right here, I call fucking bullshit. I totally should have choked him out without him noticing me, but nope, the game would just not have it. Oh, it's not a Dishonored game if you're not ridiculously flipping your sword and getting caught by guards when you're trying to choke them out. I swear at this point it's pretty much just a staple feature of the franchise. Anyway, yeah, the main reason to go up to Hamilton's room there is for that blueprint he was keeping. Not the most useful one for us, but it's still worth picking them all up. Where we are right now is housing for the patients that Adamaya used to house. I get the feeling that this outsider shrine isn't physician approved.
I so enjoy watching history warp as words pass from the lips of one to the ears of another. Imperfectly formed, half understood, poorly remembered. In the years to come, the story of the Crown Killer will be twisted and bent, hammered like soft metal. By some accounts, a monster that had to be put down. By others, a victim of treachery, preserved because in the end, you found another way. But you'll always remember the truth, won't you? Your truth, at least.
You can just tell that the outsider thinks he's being super deep and philosophical here, but buddy, you're not. You're just not. Well, for putting up with his ramblings, as usual, we acquired 2 runes, so it was worth it. So this outside area here, I've left it off for last because it's completely optional. You don't ever need to do it in order to deal with Dr. Hypatia. In fact, it's almost completely separate from that. Instead, it's more for providing detail about just how the places went down, and how the patients here who previously were very well cared for were kind of left in the lurch after Dr. Hypatia went mad. But despite being 100% optional, much like the previous optional areas we've explored, it is 100% worth doing. It has probably the highest density of outsider artifacts of anywhere in this mission, and one of the higher densities of those artifacts of any area in the game, period. You're missing out on a lot of stuff if you don't come up here, including a rather special bone charm indeed. I'm blanking on exactly what they're called with the game's terminology, but those rounded bone charms have special abilities that you cannot get via any other way. A special list that is only generated for them. They're kind of like the corrupted bone charms in that regard, except they have no downsides. They are purely beneficial. And that one in particular is super useful whether you're playing lethally or non-lethally. Now, whenever we have our arms out, our speed is not slowed at all. I'll still probably be sheathing them though often, just because I prefer how the game looks if you don't have your hands in front of your face the entire time. So we can bring up the elevator here, and it has some rather noticeable support struts. If it weren't obvious, this is best done after taking down as many guards as possible. Entering level -1 is always noisy.
I miss being dry and warm.
I miss being dry and warm, she says after rocketing down 5 stories miraculously with no injuries. Guess the Outsider's mark has a lot of passive perks. Interestingly, we have a little bit of lore that connects back to the first game. Vera More, or Granny Rags as you may be more familiar with her as, was a character from the first game. A sometimes ally, sometimes enemy, depending on exactly who you wanted to side with in that game. She too is one of the Outsiders chosen and very long-lived. And apparently in the past, she was once interned here, back when it used to be a recluse for the rich as opposed to a treatment hospital for the sick. Ultimately, that has no connection to the plot of this game. So it's just another example of the plot of this game being kinda eh, but the world building being rather excellent. You also get a free rune, so definitely worth going down there. So at this point, all we need to do is make our escape.
That's the watchtower.
And as Emily is noting, we need to disable the watchtower first. Megan first mentioned this to us when we left off at the Kanaka docks. This is the first time we can encounter one in the game, and they're always worth keeping your eyes out for. It's kind of odd that Emily mentioned it from so far away. Sometimes the positioning for triggering certain bits of dialogue can be odd. Another bit of odd triggering going on here is these guards are supposed to have a conversation, but this time through they just don't. I'm guessing it's related to that one guardsman being alerted by the elevator crashing, and that screwing up their AI in some fashion. Really, this run has been pretty bad in general for idle guard conversations. And for that I apologize, but I didn't really feel like going through again and re-recording, just for 1 or 2 minor convos. If they're so important to you, pick up the game yourself and play through it. Actually, I recommend doing that anyway if you have the ability to do so. It's a really fun game. Oh, and I wouldn't recommend sleep dotting this guard. At least not if you don't want to increase your lethality tally. Just saying. One more guard down there, and this is the watchtower. We can rewire it with that control box if we want to have it fire on the guards, or we can just take out the whale oil tank to depower it. And that's it for Mission 3, the Adamaya Institute. Probably one of my overall favorite missions in the game. It's the first truly open one that you have, and it has a sort of moody atmosphere that no other level really has. And I just really enjoy it overall, even if the whole Crown Killer mystery setup is kind of garbo.
I bet some of your older relatives came here. Back when it was a rejuvenating solarium.
I think that's supposed to be a dig at Emily, but her tone doesn't exactly make it clear.
Can we leave this place yet? I don't like it. Ready now?
Yes. Let's get back to the ship.
Did you find Sokolov?
No. But Hypatia was the Crown Killer.
What? I don't believe you.
The Duke tricked her into injecting herself with a flawed version of her serum. It changed her, but there was an antidote, so she's alive. If she remembers the murders, she'll have to deal with that.
What about Sokolov?
They gave him to a man named Kiran Jindosh. Do you know him?
Everybody knows him. The grand inventor of Serkonos.
Then he's next. Let's hope Anton's all right.
Look at that 3333. A quadruplet of triplets of failures. Oh well, stealth games are more fun anyway if you accept the failures as they come and stride on anyway. If you try and go for truly perfect runs, it just gets a little bit boring. But yeah, see you next time as we finally locate Sokolov.